Ex-landlord says he'll see me in court. I take him to court instead and win. TLDR, basically the title. Brief backstory: a couple years ago, I was in an apartment with my friend and younger sister. My sister was violent towards my friend and I ended up having to get a restraining order against her. She brought in a dog without permission, which caused some damage to the unit. I informed my landlord of the incidences of violence and the damage and sent him pictures. He basically told me to deal with it myself, which I did by getting the protective order. After this, my roommate questioned the legality of holding us responsible for her portion of rent. I told her it was, but she asked our landlord for a copy of the lease to show her uncle anyway, which admittedly was pretty stupid. Up until this point, our landlord had not asked us to leave due to my sister's actions, but he did after the lease was brought into it. We were out by the date he specified on the notice to quit, the first step in the eviction process before the eviction actually occurs. My roommate was there until midnight making sure the place was spotless. We moved to an apartment across the street. 2 weeks had passed since he was informed that we had vacated the unit, and we had not gotten anything regarding our security deposit. In our state, a landlord is required by law to either return the remainder of a security deposit within 2 weeks, or provide a letter itemizing what the deposit was used for. If they don't, the tenant is owed the entire deposit. If the withholding is willful, the tenant is owed double the original deposit. The landlord had actually told me that he would be going on vacation immediately after we vacated, so I returned our keys to him and waited to see if he would send any. He never did. After consulting with a tenants' rights group to be sure I was in the right, I sent a pre-formatted letter 16 days after we vacated, which stated the specific laws regarding security deposits, and gave him our current address to send either the deposit or receipt. The day after I sent this letter, I see him across the street, frantically running into the apartment for the first time since we moved out. I receive a text from him saying that he would return what's left of our deposit if he could get the apartment rented by the 1st of next month. I respond by telling him that, as the letter I sent explained, he forfeits the right to keep any of the deposit after the 2 weeks is up. He responded saying that he would see us in court and that we were nightmare tenants, and that this will be fun. He said he would also be taking us to court for the costs to relist and rent the apartment, which he claimed exceeded the amount of our deposit. After about a month or two of hearing nothing back, we decided to say duck it and file a small claims suit against him, as he clearly wasn't going to follow through on his threat. As the person who had almost all communication with him, I was the plaintiff in the case. He brought a letter that was dated for the day he texted me, where he arbitrarily wrote in what he used the deposit on, and claimed he sent us the letter. That obviously didn't add up, which I thoroughly explained to the judge, as he had texted me that day saying that we would get some of the deposit returned, and that he had no proof that he actually sent that letter. He clearly just wrote it and printed it out for the court hearing. During the court hearing he also said a lot of false and victim-blaming shit, such as implying that I participated in the violence that occurred, saying we caused damages that were definitely there when we moved in, and just attacking my character. The judge ruled that the withholding of the security deposit was willful and awarded us double the deposit. But of course, that wasn't the end of it, and a few days before his deadline to pay us the money, he sends me a text just letting me know that the decision has been appealed. I didn't answer and showed up to court again, and lo and behold, it's more mudslinging and arguing about things that we already established in the first hearing. The judge upheld the original decision, and he eventually mailed me the check for double the deposit. In the memo line on the check where you can write the reason for the payment, he wrote, for gaining £20. But hey, I cashed that check and spent my half on a new gaming laptop, so I'd say I got the last laugh. I desperately wanted to text him and ask him if it was as fun as he thought it would be, but resisted the urge. Edit: apparently, I didn't make this clear enough, but yes, violence occurred towards me as well. I could do without the victim blaming. And the dog that she brought in without permission chewed a tiny chunk off of the windowsill. In court, the falsified deposit receipt letter was mostly comprised of cleaning fees and damages that were there when we moved in. Edit 2, I'd encourage you to refrain from passing negative judgment unless you have all of the details of what was said and done by the landlord in this case, which are too lengthy for me to provide. If you would like more details regarding the landlord's behavior leading up to the case, PM me and I'd be happy to provide these details as well as screenshots of our correspondence. If you are unwilling to know the whole story, the dirty details, and the trauma and re-victimization I was subjected to, your opinion is meaningless and I will not defend my actions to. Now to the comments. In our state, a landlord is required by law to either return the remainder of a security deposit within 2 weeks, or provide a letter itemizing what the deposit was used for. If they don't, the tenant is owed the entire deposit. If the withholding is willful, the tenant is owed double the original deposit. I wish more states had these kinds of requirements. I had a landlord once that I'm pretty sure intended to keep my deposit for no reason whatsoever. Over a month after the lease ended, I wrote him asking for my deposit. He eventually sent it on. OP replied, "Yikes. I actually didn't even know we had a law like that until around the time of the aforementioned events. I must have gotten nervous about the deposit and looked it up or something. It should definitely be a requirement everywhere, otherwise landlords basically have free rein to abuse that security deposit." The UK has a better system, as I understand it. Security deposits are kept in escrow with the local government. When you move out, the landlord is to document any damage and get the council to approve it as genuine before they release any of the deposit to him. In America, the landlord holds the deposit. If they decide they don't want to give it back, the tenant often doesn't get the money back because of a multitude of reasons. Some don't know their legal rights. Others don't have the time to take off work to pursue it in court. I really wish we'd move to the British system. In the memo line on the check where you can write the reason for the payment, he wrote, "For gaining £20. Reply, I have received a payment in the amount of X dollars for gaining £20 as indicated in the memo line. Thank you. However, you still owe me X dollars as ordered by the court for the return of my security deposit and the penalty for not returning it on time, which was due to me by date, which is now overdue. If I do not promptly receive payment, will need to once again rely on the court to settle the matter. It'll at least make him think you might be coming after him again. If it weren't a waste of the court's time, it would be fun to see him explain himself to the judge, who would probably not be amused." OP replied, "Ugh, that would have been a great response. I did briefly mention to my fiancé that he technically didn't pay me for the security deposit yet according to his memo, but thankfully he told me to leave it. I don't know why you would drop it though. What do you have to lose? Makes me glad that moving out of my own apartment was so painless. I rented in an overpriced university area with terrible water quality. I spent a couple bucks on a new shower head because the old one was calcified to duck and I refused to use it like that. I told the landlord he could keep it, but I left the old one over there in case he cared. I didn't want to take it with me because it was already starting to become clogged from the water, and back home, I had zero issues with that. He actually seemed super thankful that I just replaced something myself and let him keep it, and didn't raise any complaints at all about the state of the apartment, which was basically the same as I got. I guess sometimes, fixing a tiny bit pays off in the long run." OP replied, "I'm glad your experience with your landlord was a pleasant one. This was also in a college town and I had rented a different apartment under the same landlord the year before and had no issues. But I also never got my deposit back for the other place and didn't know my rights as a tenant. Looking back, he is probably routinely able to abuse the fact that college kids don't know their legal rights." Woof. What a dick. I almost had to do this to one of my landlords, after specifically having him do a last walkthrough with me the day I was moving out to make sure everything was in order and he didn't see any issue. I had asked him twice if he wanted to keep a little fence I had put in too, for any future tenants with dogs. I wanted to do this walkthrough because he was very old and didn't have great health. In that state, he had 30 days to return deposit to me. Of course, it didn't happen. I had to send multiple letters citing rental law to his adult children. At some point it was a little ugly and I did feel bad about it because he ended up getting ill. At the same time, it was my money and I had tried to prevent that exact scenario by having him do a walkthrough with me. I didn't pursue the additional money I legally could have, but it was not pleasant. Still, your experience was more grueling. I'm glad you got what you were owed. OP replied, "That also sounds like a pretty crappy situation. I'm glad you eventually got what you were owed as well. It sucks that he ended up getting sick, but he is also still a landlord and has to make sure to comply with landlord-tenant law.